So let's have fun.
All right. So at some point, Walt figured out that you could buy miniature versions.
All right, so let's have fun.
All right.
All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Welcome to this live stream. Glad to see everybody. Chat box is open. Definitely say hi. Tell us where you are joining from. Great to see everybody. Welcome to this special evening edition of Meet the Miniaturists, museum edition. Excited for tonight's topic. This is going to be awesome. I can't wait. So as folks are joining, definitely open up the chat box, test it out. Let us know if it works. Say hi. Hi, Mindy from Indiana. Good to see you. Hi, Anita. Good to see you back. Anita's in Florida. Mary, good to see you out of New Jersey. Mary loves Disney. We all love Disney. Hi, Cindy Adams. How are you? Good to see you. Hi, Joyce and Yvonne, North Carolina and Vermont, Elliott City. Great to see everybody. We got another minute before we start, but it's definitely love to hear from you guys and where you're joining from. And thank you for joining. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we bring on our guest. But I just wanted to let you guys know, if you don't know already, I have a humongous auction coming up of the Buckalters estate. They are a wonderful couple from up in Suffern, New York, and they had a beautiful collection of miniatures. So tomorrow, stand by, because I will be sending out the registration as well as the links to the catalog, so that you guys can either start bidding if you want, register for the auction, etc. So the auction is planned for Sunday, September 19th at 10 a.m. Eastern time in the morning. So looking forward to that. A couple of pieces are behind me, room boxes, but for the most part, this is really an extraordinary collection of tiny treasures. Beautiful, beautiful, high-end miniatures in many, many different categories, from flowers to furniture to artwork, paintings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, all right, let me go back and look at the hellos in the chat box. Hi, Angela from Oakland. They go to the Walt Disney Family Museum regularly. Great. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So with that, keeping the chat box open, definitely interact, give feedback. We're going to be taking questions at some point throughout. If you guys have questions, definitely keep them coming. But in the meantime, I do want to first and foremost thank our special guests from the Walt Disney Family Museum. We're going to bring Chris Mullen up. Chris is the Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator at the museum. We are thrilled to have him here to take us through this, because he does this. He takes folks on tours. He knows his stuff about Walt Disney. And I don't know if you guys know, but Walt Disney was a miniaturist. And I mean, I really just learned this myself a few years ago. And it's just so amazing and thrilling to know that this American icon loves tiny treasures. So we're going to learn through Chris all about Walt Disney, all about his love of miniatures, how it influenced this tremendous body of work that made him become this American icon. And so, yeah, so I'm thrilled. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking us through this. So I'm going to go ahead and start I'm going to share my screen, because we want to share a little bit about the museum and what it looks like for those folks who have not been there yet. Give them a little preview, and let's share that while you tell us about yourself and tell us a little bit about the museum before we get into Walt Disney himself.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Chris Mullen. I'm the Walt Disney Family Museum's Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator. I'm also a storyteller, tour guide, and co-host of the museum's official podcast. The museum opened on October 1st, 2009. Our anniversary is coming up. The Walt Disney Family Museum presents an inspirational journey through the life of Walter Elias Disney. Our mission is twofold. One, to inform present and future generations about the man, and through his story, to inspire them to heed their imagination and persevere in pursuing their goals. The museum was co-founded by Walt's daughter, Diane Disney Miller, and Walt's grandson, Walter Elias Disney Miller.
Wow, that's just amazing. I didn't realize it was only since '09. So it really has not been that long in the scheme of things. So I would think that that's a new-ish museum.
Absolutely.
In the scheme of things. Wow. Okay. Beautiful. So yeah, we're all getting a chance to look at the museum itself. It is just beautiful. It just looks like a beautiful space. So why don't we talk about why don't we get right to it? Let's talk about Walt Disney. Let's talk about his interest in miniatures. Set the stage for us about who this man was and how he related to miniatures.
Of course. Well, Walt Disney was one of the most prolific storytellers in history. Walt, of course, arrived in Hollywood in 1923 with only $40 in his pocket and built with his brother Roy what we know today as the Walt Disney Company. Mm-hmm. Walt embraced innovations in short cartoons at first, including innovations in synchronized sound, famously with Steamboat Willie starring Mickey Mouse, color, personality, and achieving the illusion of depth in animated short cartoons. He launched star characters, Mickey and Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, Pluto, and others. And ever the risk taker, he produced the first animated feature-length film made out of Hollywood, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, to critical and commercial acclaim. Wow. He continued trailblazing in film, expanding into live action and documentary films, earning 32 Academy Awards along the way, which is still the individual record. In the 1950s, Walt continued expanding into television and creating the modern theme park that we know today as Disneyland. In the 1960s, Walt turned his sights towards creating an educational pipeline for future Disney artists in the form of CalArts, expanding his brand of themed entertainment experiences with the Mineral King Ski Resort that unfortunately didn't end up coming to be, but also Walt Disney World, as well as rethinking the way that modern cities are built with Epcot.
Right, right. I don't think people realize just how iconic he was. I mean, and just what he contributed to just the American way of life, just about everything. But what's, I think, most interesting and why we're really here is his relationship to the miniature and, and where all that began. So could we talk a little bit about his interest in miniatures, where that might have started? And then we're going to get into a little bit of how that sort of influenced, the kind of the body of work that we see today.
For sure. Well, one of the connections of our location, the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, a nice little connection we have is that Walt's fascination with miniatures started right here in 1939 at what was called the Golden Gate International Exposition. It was a World's Fair of sorts, and among the exhibits that were in the Golden Gate International Exposition was a wonderful exhibit of miniatures by Narcissa Thorne, the famous Thorne Rooms. Yes. Of course, as many of your listeners might know, Narcissa Thorne was known for using miniature furnishings and accessories gathered by her uncle during his world travels. And Narcissa Thorne used those to create exquisite rooms decorated to represent European and American interiors of different eras. It was said that the rooms were so perfectly crafted that viewing them was like becoming miniaturized yourself and then entering another time. Of course, Walt Disney saw these and was completely engaged, and it went from there into being a full-blown, lifelong passion for him.
Yeah. So, I sort of stumbled upon this image. I hope you guys can see it. I stumbled upon this image online and I swiped it and I wanted to share it. So I'm not quite sure if this is an image where Walt Disney was actually in the museum where the Thorne Rooms were, or if this was at maybe the World's Fair where they were first exhibited. But either way, this is an image of Walt Disney playing with, I don't want to use that word lightly, but, handling the Thorne Room the Thorne Room miniatures, which my head just practically exploded when I saw this image. Not only because here is this American icon, you know, handling miniatures, but what got me was here was an explosion of two icons in the miniatures world and the entertainment world coming together. Narcissus Blackthorne and Walt Disney right here in this photograph. So I just had to share that because I think this is just basically says it all when we ask the question, you know, how did miniatures influence, or how, you know, where is his interest in miniatures? He's showing you right there the way he's handling that beautiful grandfather clock. He's in front of one of the Thorne Rooms, just mind exploding. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is just having these two icons come together you know, to come together so beautifully. You know, because one of the things that we struggle with in the miniatures world is getting that credibility that miniatures are deserving of attention, awareness. And, you know, so anytime I hear, whether it's a celebrity or someone like Walt Disney being into miniatures, I'm like, yes, they get it. So he was influenced early on in 1939 by the Thorne Rooms, which were on view at the World's Fair. And then it goes on from there, right?
Yes. So Walt continued on after being really entranced by the Thorne Rooms to starting to collect and build his own miniatures collection of his own. Walt first started acquiring pieces really seriously during his European travels, bringing home countless objects of glass, wood, china, etc., either buying them in antique gift shops or purchasing them through catalogs. In a letter that he sent to his friend in 1952, he said, "My hobby is a lifesaver. When I work with these small objects, I become so absorbed that the cares of the studio fade away, at least for a time." So that really shows the level that Walt felt about miniatures, about acquiring them, about putting them together. It was really not just a de-stressor for him, but it was also very creatively engaging for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important thing that you're saying, and I think a lot of miniatures can relate, because, you know, you get involved in this as a hobby or as an art form, you know, some say as a means to escape, some say, you know, as a means to you know, take me away from everyday life. But then some people, you know, are involved in miniatures as a lifestyle. You know, they are either artists or creators and things like that. So, but it sounds like he did both. But originally, do we think his intent was to have a hobby, or did they just all come together at the same time, influencing his work and also being a hobby?
Well, he definitely needed a hobby. He was advised by the studio nurse to find ways to blow off steam. And in addition to putting together model trains, a very famous case of Walt being able to blow off steam, in one case literally, was that he was able to build his very own miniature railroad on his property at his home, called the Carrollwood Pacific, with a locomotive called the Lily Bell, named after his wife Lillian, that was both stimulating for him to put together and to ride around and to give guests of his house rides around, but also just to put together and to know how they work and how all the pieces come together to create a whole object.
Yeah. There's one photograph I have in my mind. I don't have it here. Is a photograph of him riding that train, and it's just in my mind as like an iconic photograph of just him being childlike and playing and just being free. And that's the sense I get from who he might have been, you know, that kind of just creative and free flowing, but also business oriented, right? I mean, was there more than one side to him?
Yeah, of course. You know, Walt was a human being. He was not just a businessman, but he was an artist, and he needed these activities to sometimes take his mind off of the stresses of work. And that's really what the Walt Disney Family Museum is all about. We're about showing not just the man who started this great company, who has created all these great movies and theme parks and resorts and experiences, but also that there was a man behind the brand, and he was very much a person just like you and I, had dealt with the same stresses, had the same 24 hours in the day. And our museum is all about showing that personal side to him as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you get that. All right. So I might switch around a little bit. I want to share this photograph that I also found online. Can you talk a little bit about what this is? Because I think this is, to me, this is an example of the transition or the influence of the Thorne Rooms that they had on Walt Disney. It just looks to me, this is a room box, basically, just like a Thorne Room. But talk a little bit about this and what this means, and how this is part of that influence.
Absolutely. So in 1949, Disney released a film called So Dear to My Heart, and it was based loosely around his childhood growing up in Marceline, Missouri. It was a very personal film for him. It was originally going to be his first live action feature film, but his distributor at the time, RKO, felt like they should add animation to it, because when people saw the name Disney, they thought animation. So they added animated sequences to it. And one location that's in the film is Granny Kincaid's cabin. And so Walt, going off of plans that Imagineer Ken Anderson started, Walt personally built a 1/8 inch scale model of Granny Kincaid's cabin from the film. And that's what you see right here in front of you. And this model wasn't just shown at Walt's home or at the studio. Walt displayed his hand-built model at the Los Angeles Pan Pacific Auditorium as part of the Festival of California Living show in 1952. And an important part about what Granny Kincaid's cabin means in the grand scheme of the story of Walt's hobby and about Walt's interest in entertaining people beyond just making movies is that Granny Kincaid's cabin was going to be the first diorama in a project that would be called Disneylandia.
So that is the connection right there. Interesting. So there was also something I had heard, that he was planning to have these dioramas, or maybe something similar, go on the road to share with people around the country. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So Disneylandia overall was going to show different scenes of Americana across a number of years. And it would travel the country by train, and people would go onto the train car and they would look through the dioramas. But unfortunately, the entire Disneylandia idea did not come to be. Walt priced it out, found that it would be too cost prohibitive to go forward. Walt also wasn't sure operationally, logistically, how they were going to get that many people onto the trains. Just the thought of buying his own train cars, it just became an expense that Walt wasn't comfortable with going forward with for this project. So Disneylandia wouldn't end up coming to be. But of course, Granny Kincaid's cabin was still created by that point. And Walt was still thinking of entertaining people beyond just making movies. And of course, that name Disneylandia would stick around for his next big project. A few years down the road, Disneyland Park.
Wow. See, one of the things that I feel like there's a connection is, the Thorne Rooms were all about bringing interior design and architecture to the masses. And Mrs. Thorne couldn't actually, travel around with these humongous rooms. So she created them in miniature. So there's sort of a similar concept here where, you can't bring all these ideas to people. You have to bring the people to the ideas. And so it sounds like there were some influences there between what Mrs. Thorne wanted to do and ultimately what Walt Disney wanted to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And if you look at Disneyland itself, there are a lot of miniature influences in Disneyland. So even though Disneylandia as a traveling diorama of miniatures didn't end up coming to be as it was originally designed.
Uh-oh, we cut out. No, don't cut out, not now. Come back. Can you guys hear me? Oh, something's happened. Oh, you're back. You were gone, but now you're back.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
I'll just take a step back. I saw
Yeah.
my internet connection was unstable right after you said that. Essentially, that while Disneylandia as a traveling diorama of miniatures didn't come to be, a lot of miniatures elements were folded into what became Disneyland Park that we know and love today.
Right, for sure, for sure. Oh my gosh, that's just so great. So yeah, so we talked about the traveling dioramas. I mean, I wanted you talked a little bit about his miniatures. And actually, before we go on to talk about his miniatures, there is a funny story about how he placed ads. He didn't want to spend too much money on the miniatures. So can you talk about that funny story with his secretaries?
Absolutely. And this is a story that echoes a little bit later on in the story when he's purchasing land for Walt Disney World. But obviously, he knew that if folks knew that Walt Disney was acquiring miniatures for a project, then the price of those miniatures would skyrocket. So Walt found a way around this by putting advertisements in newspapers and hobby magazines, seeking vintage miniatures of all kinds for what was going to go in Disneylandia. But he asked his secretaries, who agreed, to put their names in as the interested parties. Right. And the ad, I've got the ad here. It says, wanted anything in miniatures to a scale of 1.5 inch to the foot or under, up to and including early 1900s. Give full description, price, private collector, K. Gordon. And Catherine Gordon was the name of one of his secretaries. So Walt knew that, if people knew that it was Walt Disney who wanted these miniatures, then obviously they knew that he could pay up for them. But he didn't want this to attract attention. This was still a project that was still near and dear to him. So he went forward somewhat anonymously.
So do we know if some of those miniatures, if it actually got to the point where he commissioned some of those miniatures, and if they ended up in his collection, that that is where you are right now?
Yeah, well, although Disneylandia didn't come to be, so we don't know how they would have been arranged. We do know that Walt acquired a ton of pieces. Our whole collection of Walt's miniatures totals about 1,500 pieces, and that includes minuscule tableware, including delicate tea services, small Toby jugs, sky blue Wedgwood pitchers, washing bowls of willowware, Bennington crocks and jars, sparkling wine and perfume bottles, drinking glasses, silverware, and candelabra sets, tools from various eras, all of these that would come together and tell the story of these different eras. So Walt definitely collected quite a bit of those, even if the overall project didn't come to fruition.
So just tell us a little bit about the room that you're in right now. I don't think we talked about that, but you're in one of the galleries that houses his miniatures, right?
Absolutely. So this is our gallery 7B, and this room is dedicated to Walt's hobbies, his family memories. Right behind me on my right, which would be your left, we have various family photos from Walt's daughter's weddings, family trips. We also have some of the miniatures and toys that Walt collected on his journey that in some way creatively inspired him towards creating Disneyland. One of my favorite things that we have on display, you can see it over my shoulder here, this little semicircle item here, is a bracelet of miniature Oscar figures. So at some point, Walt figured out that you could buy miniature versions of Oscar statuettes for every single one that you win. Walt, of course, has the individual record of Academy Award wins, so there were quite a few. And Walt famously not only has the individual record all time of Academy Award wins, but he also has the record of individual wins in one night with 4 wins.
Wow.
for all 4 different films. And
Wow.
but Walt's wife Lily really wanted to come, and Walt wasn't very confident that he was going to win. He said, "There's really no point. I'm not going to win any of these. You should just stay home." And of course, Walt's wife Lillian was not happy, to say the least, when she watched the presentation and saw that Walt had not only won one of those, he had won all 4 and swept and had a historic night.
Oh, wow.
So Walt had all of these miniature statuettes fashioned first into a necklace, and then his wife said that she would rather them be in a bracelet. So it was fashioned into a bracelet, and that helped Walt get out of the doghouse, so to speak.
That is so great. I love that story. Do we know what scale those are in? Do we think it's 1/12?
That I don't know. That would be a good guess.
Are they about?
They're very tiny.
They're very tiny.
They're about an inch.
And how tall do we think a real Oscar is? Probably about a foot. So they're probably 12 scale. All right. So
That's about right.
Let's take a question, if we can, from the group. So actually, Gail had a question about the dioramas being preserved. I had that same question. Are any of the dioramas preserved? Do we know where they are?
That is a great question. Unfortunately, only one diorama really was made in full, and that was the Granny's Kincaid cabin diorama. That was kept together, and we actually have some of it on display just across the room to me here. For the purposes of displaying it, some of the pieces have been moved around so that some of the work can be highlighted. And in fact, some of those very same pieces from Granny Kincaid's cabin are on their way to an exhibition that we can talk about a little bit later, unless you want me to talk about it now.
Let's I want to share some of the photographs of some of the miniatures, and then we'll go to what the big news is, because there's a photograph of some of one of the miniatures that's actually part of that big news. So
absolutely.
Let's take one more question. Was there an inventory of the miniature donations? I don't know what that means. Was there an inventory of the miniature donations? Were there donations? Well, they were commissioned.
That I'm not sure of. We do have some receipts within the case of miniatures here showing Walt purchasing miniatures, but we don't have anything related to donations.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's go through some of the photographs of some of the miniatures, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about them. The first one we're looking at is like a set of books, beautiful, beautiful, tiny handbound books. They look like, and
yes.
Also, and we do see receipts there too.
Yes. So that's what I was referring to. Some receipts there. As you can see, there are books here on the left, a little bit faded there. It says Abraham Lincoln. So that's a biography of Abraham Lincoln in miniature. And then on the right side here, those red bound books. Right on top is Macbeth. Walt had several volumes of Shakespeare in miniature. And you can see attached to that book, sort of in the middle left there, that there's a magnifying glass that you can actually read them.
So they are readable books.
They are readable books, yes.
That is just great. And that is so the right way to do it. All right, then there's this lovely piece.
Yes, so this was the main piece that I was referring to about the that exhibition that we'll talk about in a bit.
Yes.
So this was a 4-poster bed that Walt himself built. And you may be thinking to yourself that bedspread looks a little funky, a little groovy, a little not quite, maybe not quite period accurate. But the fabric for that bedspread and for the pillowcases actually came from the fabric of one of his daughter Diane's dolls.
Oh,
the doll dresses.
Oh, it looks very groovy. It looks very 60s. Do we think it was done in the 60s or maybe earlier?
It had to be earlier because Diane would have been a little girl in the 30s and 40s. But floral pattern outlives us all.
Yeah, that's a pretty mod look. I mean, that came later on. So definitely, yeah. All right, so there's some more books. And then
yes, so we see some more volumes of Shakespeare here. And some small perfume bottles there.
I love it.
Walt, of course, while he was traveling, didn't just collect miniatures for himself. He collected miniatures that he thought that his wife and his daughters would like, including these little perfume bottles here. Of course, Walt loved receiving miniatures just as much as he loved giving them. They engaged him so much and really spoke to him creatively. So he figured that other folks who understood how passionate he was about miniatures would understand and feel the same way.
Do we think he had a favorite miniature or a favorite category of miniatures?
That's a great question. It's hard to know, but if I had to guess of a favorite miniature, I would think it would be his miniature railroad that ran around his property, because it not only gave him so much joy to build it, to assemble it, but also to share with other people. And of course, some of the folks that helped assemble that train with him became some of his earliest Imagineers for Disneyland. So that also then connects to his later projects as well.
Yeah, we did have a question about, I'm going to go back because I think it was on the bed. Oh, hold on. Yeah, on the bed, there looks to be either a guitar, a musical instrument, a mandolin. What is that?
That I don't know. I'm not much of a musician myself, but it definitely appears to be in a mandolin shape.
Or a sitar? I don't know. But yeah, okay. So let's talk about some of these dinnerware plates. And is there a connection to the Queen Mary dollhouse here at all?
That I'm not sure of, but I know that the ceramic plates are made in the style of, there's some French influence on some of the plates, as well as some American scenes in there. So these are definitely plates that were collected from all over. That Walt saw, knew he needed to have in his collection, whether they fit in a current project or not. That really interested him.
Yeah, they're fabulous. And what we're showing and these are pieces that are in the gallery right now, right?
Yes.
They pretty much appear to be in 12 scale for the most part. I don't see a lot of diversions of scale. Am I right? I mean,
yeah, it's all mostly in that size.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it might be a little overscaled, but it is within the 12 scale. So in other words, now we're looking at the full bedroom or piece that he created. There's that hand painted, it looks like a hand painted wardrobe. Looks a little overscaled, but looks still to be within 12 scale. So there is exciting news, and it has a lot to do with these pieces specifically, right?
Yes. So these pieces and several others are on their way to the Met Museum in New York. There's a very exciting exhibition that's going to be opening this December, running through March 6th, called Inspiring Walt Disney, the Animation of French Decorative Arts. So it's really exciting. It's their first ever exhibition exploring the work of Walt Disney and the Walt Disney Animation Studios hand-drawn animation. It examines references to European visual culture in Disney animated films, such as the Gothic revival architecture in Cinderella, medieval influences in Sleeping Beauty, and then a little bit later on, a little bit after the time of our museum covers, Rococo-inspired objects that come to life in 1989's Beauty and the Beast.
That is just amazing. So I have two questions, actually. How many pieces out of that 1,500 that you say is part of the miniatures collection are actually in the gallery, and then how many pieces are just hidden away somewhere that need to be seen?
That is a great question. I haven't done a count because there's just so many splayed out and in several cases around me, but definitely in the hundreds that are here on display of Walt's entire 1,500 piece collection. So
you think there are a lot in the gallery that are out right now?
Yes. Yeah, there was great care taken in deciding what miniatures would be selected that really helped tell the story of what Walt was interested in at the time and what would definitely go on to inspire his later projects as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fantastic that miniatures are getting into that show because, like I said before, we're always looking for ways to add credibility to this thing that we love so much, which is miniatures. I mean, I just think it's just incredible how much, how much miniatures has been a part of his life and how they relate to everything he's done. Like we talked a little bit about how Disney is filled with miniatures. If you really look around, even the buildings themselves at Disney World are all scaled down to some degree. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's just wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about the Disneyland display that's on view at your museum?
Absolutely. I see one of my favorite pictures of it on display right here. So we have a model of Disneyland in miniature that is not supposed to represent Disneyland at any one time, but it's supposed to be the Disneyland of Walt's imagination, which shows roughly the park during his lifetime, but a little bit afterwards as well, showing attractions that Walt either saw put into the parks or had approved concepts of prior to his passing. So you won't find newer lands such as Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Toontown, or even anything from Disney California Adventure. But you'll find some attractions long gone, like from what you see in the photo here, right in the back of Frontierland there, where you see that cavern that's blue and black lit there, where Big Thunder Mountain Railroad is today. That was originally the Rainbow Caverns mine train that opened in 1956, eventually expanded into the mine train through Nature's Wonderland in 1960.
Right. Awesome. I think that's just great. I did have one of these photos out of order, and I didn't want to miss this other connection with the Thorne Rooms. So this is one of the pieces in his collection of it's a stove, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So this goes back to Walt Disney creating his miniature railroad. Walt personally furnished the caboose of the train himself, furnished the entire inside of the train, including one of these Potbelly stoves that has been painted in the turn of the century motif that Walt was looking for with his miniature railroad. As you can see, Walt didn't create just the one for his miniature train. He received a lot of positive feedback from some of his friends who saw his miniatures. And so Walt started to fashion more Potbelly stoves to give out as gifts. Walt actually created about 100 in total. And Walt anonymously sent a handful of them to an antique gift shop in New York. And what's really exciting is that Walt's love of miniatures comes full circle. Because who should happen upon Walt's Potbelly stoves that are being sold anonymously? Nobody knows that it's Walt Disney that made these stoves, but Narcissa Thorne, who purchased one of Walt's Potbelly stoves.
That is probably my favorite story out of all of them, because that really does bring it full circle, just connecting the miniatures world to Walt Disney. That is just incredible. Okay, let's take a couple more questions. We did have a question about repeating the info on the show. That's the Met show I'm thinking she's interested in. So it's at the Met in New York City starting in December, right?
Yes, December 10th, 2021 to March 6th, 2022. It's called Inspiring Walt Disney, the Animation of French Decorative Arts. And it examines Walt's personal fascination with European art and the use of French motifs in Disney films and parks. Most notably, Gothic revival architecture in Cinderella, medieval influences in Sleeping Beauty, and then a little bit later, Rococo objects that come to life in Beauty and the Beast in 1989.
That's just fantastic. Well, I will definitely be planning to get myself to that museum to do something in terms of just going to see it and then communicating back what I see. So stand by for that. And maybe we'll even get a chance to do a Meet the Miniaturist there. I don't know. We'll see. But, this has been great. Thank you so much, Chris, for sort of taking us through that. This has been such great learning and just so much great information about how Walt Disney, and his relationship to miniatures just just it's just influenced everything we see today. Thank you so much. This has been really, really great. I appreciate you taking the time to do this for us and to take us through this. And I hope everyone who is watching today can get themselves out to see the museum because it looks absolutely beautiful, and ultimately to see all of the wonderful tiny treasures. So thank you. And thank you for all of your help and all of your wonderful words today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I can't wait to have you and all of your listeners come up to the
Yeah,
museum and see our miniatures.
that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody at home, thank you for joining tonight and have a great rest of your week. All right, bye.